Today is Thursday, January the 7th, 2010. And this is the start of an interview with Mr. Frank Schramke at the Macomb County Services located at 15945 Canal Road, Clinton Township, Michigan. Mr. Schramke is 85 years old, was born September 27th, 1924. Mr. Schramke currently resides at 42377 Bayberry, Clinton Township, Michigan. My name is Dave Brousseau and I will be the interviewer, and Mr. Paul Wilhelm will be the videographer. Mr. Schramke, would you give us state for the record the branch of service that you served?
United States Army Air Force.
Can we go back and can you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you were born, your family, leading up to your service?
Well, I was born in Saginaw, Michigan, and I was the oldest of four boys. Myself and the youngest brother Bob are all that's left, and we all went to high school together, grade school, high school together, and myself and my brother Jim, we were about 15 months apart. We were pretty close. We were both in the service at the same time. He was in the Marine Corps, I was in the Air Force. And
were you drafted or were you?
I was drafted, yeah.
Did you know it was coming?
Oh yeah, everybody knew it was coming. In fact, I tried to enlist in the Marine Corps before, but I couldn't. I'd had a strep infection or something like that, and my couldn't pass the urine test.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, it was a buddy deal, and the Frenchy Castaneer, he went on, and he was killed in Saipan. And a lot of the guys that I knew enlisted in the Marine Corps, especially from St. Andrews High School. It was a quite a few of them. I was just lucky to get in the Air Force because when I was drafted, they wanted to know what your hobbies were, and I says, well, I like to build up model airplanes.
Wow.
And the interviewer, he reaches in his desk and pulls out a model airplane and wanted to know what this was, what that was, and I go, oh, sure, I can tell him. I knew that was a tail, there was an aileron, and so on and so forth. And he says, what's your dad do? He said, auto mechanic. And you know anything about mechanics? Well, I said, I work with my dad a lot. I said, I can pull torque down the head on a 1934 Chevrolet and do it, and I said, change the spark plugs and do this and that, keep it running. And next thing I knew, I was in the Air Force. I was left Fort Custer for Clearwater, Florida, and took my basic training at the Biltmore Hotel. The Air Force took over all those hotels in Florida back in '43 or thereabouts, and they filled the fairways with sand and used the golf courses for training ground. And in the Biltmore Hotel, that was an all wooden hotel, big old thing, and but I got there kind of late and they were pretty well filled up, so I ended up out in the courtyard in a 6-man squad tent. all the time I was there, which was all right because it was nice and cool. And a little bit cold and damp in the morning sometimes, but then I took my basic training in Florida in springtime, so I was in good shape.
Yeah, I think the rains don't come until the fall, do they?
Yeah, that's about it. Yeah, and if you get a rain during the summer, why? When we left there, it was just starting to get warm. Getting a rain or two. I mean, you get a quick rain and then dry right off.
Now, had you finished high school when you got
Yeah.
drafted?
Mhm.
Were you working?
Oh yeah, I was working as a grocery clerk in a little store in Shields, Michigan.
Hmm.
And that was the only job you could get at the time. I mean, they wouldn't hire you in any of the plants or anything like that because they knew you were going to get drafted. So I took a couple of courses on, they had some night courses on machine shop work. But, I think, as I remember, the only thing I really got any good instruction on was a drill press machine, something like that. But actually at that time, I mean, for the younger guys, I mean, you either got a, you know, sort of a dead-end job, or because they knew you were going to get drafted, or else the guys were enlisting, and well, that was the same thing that happened. I mean, before the war, I mean, there really wasn't nothing going on. I mean, times never got good till they started shipping the stuff over to England, you know, and they started the tank plants and the gun plants and this and that and the other thing. Saginaw, the GM, they converted all to Saginaw steering gear. They went to gun production, and they made the 30 caliber carbine. I mean, everybody knew where I was from when we got overseas because our carbines were all made in Saginaw. And
So how'd your family think about both of you and your brother going in the service?
well, my younger brother Jim, he lied his age, and it kind of made my dad mad. He went to see a lawyer, and the lawyer told him, he says, well, you can't, by the time you get him out, he'll be 18, and they'll turn around and draft him anyway. They'll stall you till he's 18, and then they'll say, well, he's, and that's,
So you really had three in,
no, there was just the two of us in.
oh, didn't
I'm
you
talking
say?
about my brother Jim.
Yeah,
And he went in the Marine Corps shortly after I got out of aircraft mechanic school at Keystone Field, Mississippi, because I saw him at San Diego at the Marine Corps base. I was at Consolidated Aircraft going to crew chief school. And on one side of the fence was Consolidated Aircraft, and the other side of the fence was the Marine Corps base. And we could see them drilling and going through their training, you know, and we're sitting out there in the hangar in the shade. And then we looked at that and said, boy, am I lucky, I never went to. And,
so how was boot training for you?
oh, that was good. It was good. Had a nice drill instructor. He was an old boy from the field artillery. And he'd been riding one of those guns. They were pulling behind a truck or something. And he fell off and broke both ankles. So he had to wear low-cut shoes. And technically he could have got out, but he said, oh, he just wanted to stay in, so they let him stay in. And he was a drill instructor. And he was a real nice fella. I mean, well, he was tough. I mean, the first thing I remember, the first time we had an inspection, I'm left-handed, so I put my belt on backwards to everybody else. I comb my hair backwards to everybody else, and I had to change that.
Really?
Yeah. And then learn to part your hair on your right-hand side and make your belt go to the right, I mean, and,
That must have been quite a change though, from being at
Oh,
home
it-
to going to boot training.
yeah, but everybody else was doing it, you know, they were all, I mean, all those kids were the same age as you were, they were all 18, 19 years old. And the Air Force training wasn't, you know, it wasn't that tough. I mean, Marine Corps, that was a different story. Or you know, infantry basic, I mean, that would, you know, I mean, I talked to those guys and from what, you had adequate training as far as the Air Force is concerned, but I mean, they didn't figure you were gonna do much marching, or, I mean, they wanted either to make you a mechanic or a radio man or armor or something like that. I mean, that was your job, so. And you got a pretty good education. But the only problem was, there was no jobs when you got, when you got out of service. You had to find a new field.
So what made you decide on the field you got into?
In the Air Force, they just, I took, you know, the tests and so on and so forth, and they put you in this slot, this is where you're going. And the one guy, from what they told us, if your test scores were pretty decent, they sent you to crew chief school. If your test scores weren't too good, you ended up a tail gunner or a belly gunner or a side, you know. I mean, it was all, and it probably depended on your size and, or what they needed to, you know.
So what's involved with a crew chief?
You're in charge of the aircraft, all the maintenance, and we had what they call the production line maintenance setup. I mean, it's all I had to do was greet the aircraft when it come in. You go through this signaling bit, get them in their slot, and then they cut their engines, so on and so forth. The pilot will come out and give you the Form 1A, and that would list any defects that, you know, and, you know, if there was some missing or oil leaks, hydraulic leaks, this, that, and the other thing, and your job was to make sure it got fixed. And if it was a radio problem, you turned that over to, you know, to the radio people. I mean, if it was a gun problem, that went to the armament guys. And then when you're all done, you started the 4 engines up, made sure it was running good, and shut her off. And if you were overseas, why, they even taught you, well, they taught me to even taxi the B-24, because there would be times when you wouldn't have a tractor to tow that aircraft. So you better know how to move it out of its spot. And well, the only reason I learned how to taxi a B-24 was one captain wanted me to be his crew chief, and he was leaving there, and he was in on a safety program, but they wouldn't cut me loose. And so that made me mad. So I went up and see the CO and wanted to get transferred overseas. And he says, well, he says, I can put you in the infantry tomorrow. I said, well, I wasn't trained for the infantry. I was trained as a crew chief. And he didn't say much. And then the next thing I know, I was in the 509th Composite Group. I was on my way overseas.
Okay, what's the composite group mean?
That was, the 509th Composite Group was the outfit that dropped the atomic bomb. Colonel Tibbets was our commander. We had 15 B-29s. We had 5 C-54s. We had a bomb squadron, a troop carrier squadron. We had an MP squadron, and They had all kinds of service. It was a group that could run by itself. Plus we had all the top, you know, the Manhattan Project clearances and stuff like that.
Now, you went in March of '43, and you got out of boot training,
Well, then I went
September?
to, yeah, about that. And,
Then where did you go?
I went to Keesler Field, Mississippi for aircraft mechanic school. Then I went to Consolidated Aircraft for crew chief school.
Okay, now in the mechanic school, what's that all about? How long was that? And
That was about 6 months. And that was the only problem there was you're in Biloxi, Mississippi. And it's hot, and it's wet, and muggy.
but in 6 months, they taught you everything you needed to know about it.
Well, you didn't get everything. You got a good basic understanding. And they kind of fine-tuned you so you knew something about B-24 when you went to Consolidated Aircraft. And they taught
What would be different between a B-24 engine and a B-17 or a B-29?
Oh, well, the B-17 was a Wright 1800 cc engine. The B-24 was a Pratt & Whitney, and the B-29 was a Wright 2400 cc engine. I mean, but the B-29s that we had, they were fuel injected. All the other stuff was carbureted, and
So other than size, they're pretty much the same
pretty
thing.
much the same thing. I mean, they got a spark plug there.
You can work on one, you can work on all of them.
Yeah, to a degree. I mean,
Yeah.
you needed some. Well, it's just like a Ford or Chevrolet. I mean,
Yeah.
there's some. You know, the guy has takes a little time to get used to each one's little tricks or
Yeah.
kinks.
Yeah, yeah.
And bugs in them and so
What
on.
it can do and what it can't do.
Oh, yeah.
So what got you to be the crew chief? I mean, you were a mechanic. Was there something you did in mechanic school?
Well, my grades apparently were halfway decent, and I went in, when I went to Pueblo, Colorado Army Air Base, we came in and they had to put us on the alert crew, and that was strictly working nights. They ran that program 24 hours a day. So then the flight chief, he only had 12 guys, so we had to either repair what was left over from the other, or gas up and pre-flight the 24s and so on and so forth that had come in. Anything that came in late, we had to take care of all the guys that came in late. There was always some stragglers on the training missions. I mean, they used to go, well, they'd go from Pueblo, Colorado, they'd go clear to California, they'd sit down there, come back, and somebody always had some problems of some sort, because those are old beat up aircraft. They weren't in the best of shape. And so that kept us busy, and I had a good flight chief, and then they went, then they come along and they put, instead of being just an alert crew, I mean, they had 3 full shifts, and so and they kept rotating, 8 hours on day shift, 8 hours on afternoon shift, 8 hours on midnights. I mean, every 2 weeks, so
Now, when you say these were old aircraft, when you say old,
well,
you're
they
saying
had
a
a lot of
couple years?
miles, a lot of air, a lot of hours, they were all the earlier stuff. I mean, the later stuff come out, I mean, was, no paint on, and we're all, I mean, we had when those B-24H's come in out of Willow Run, I mean, you could tell the difference, but I mean, you know, I was really had the later guns and all the little nicest, you know, they made them a nicer aircraft.
Now, the earlier ones, I don't think had any air conditioning and.
But there was never any air conditioning on a B-24. The only thing you depended on it to keep you warm up there was your flight suit and a Southwind gasoline heater, which didn't work all the time because that igniter was didn't like letting gasoline. They were always fouled out.
And I imagine it gets plenty cold up there.
Oh, I never did much high altitude. I never had a chance to fly at too much high altitude. And but from what the guys told me, I really didn't want any part of that. I was glad I never had to do that.
So then you go to flight chief, crew chief school. What do you do there? Just learn how to, some more mechanics? Or
Yeah, you
more how to manage the whole?
Well, you specialized in the B-24.
I see.
Whereas they would send the guys to B-17 or B-26 or B-25, you know, whatever, wherever they were gonna.
Were there specific areas that the 24 and the 17 and the 26 went when they were?
The B-24s and 17s, they went mostly to Europe. The B-24s did an awful lot of South Pacific flying because they were longer range and could carry a little bit heavier bomb load. And they weren't as well built as they weren't as tough as the 17s. The 17 was tough. I mean, Boeing built an entirely different design as far as the body, I mean, and the wing. I mean, it would take more flat. Whereas the B-24, I mean, if you were over in Europe and the flat got your wing while you bought the farm.
Yeah. And you didn't have that bigger problem over there.
Not in the South Pacific.
Yeah.
They did well in the South Pacific, and because they were pretty fast for a big bomber, but I was happy with them, and then I also was much more happier with the B-29. And
anything interesting happened in crew chief school?
the only thing was that I just went around the fence and went and saw my brother and a couple of the guys from Saginaw.
Great.
Later I saw overseas in Saipan and Tinian.
So after you're through with crew chief, where do they send you then?
They sent me to Pueblo, Colorado.
And what do you do there?
And I was assistant crew chief on the what they call the sea flight, which was the tail end of the. We got all the dirty jobs.
Dirty by meaning?
Well, stuff that people didn't want. You know, it's just like any factory or anything like that. I mean, if there's some like some engines that don't want to run too good, well, they'll keep putting them off, and then you get stuck with that thing. And so we had some pretty smart guys. Mm-hmm. And our flight chief, he was an old timer. He knew it. And in fact, all the old timers that I worked with, they all were well qualified. I mean, what they had us guys doing, we were doing all the grunt work, and then they were, you know, they were really practical engineers. They might not have any bars on their shoulder, but they were cracker jacks. I mean, they had, you know, 3, 4, 5 years experience. Most of them were been in the service, you know, before the war started.
So are they kind of rotating back off the active duty status when they
Yeah.
come back in the States?
We had one flight chief, he had been he'd been a flight engineer on a B-24 that was flying over the hump. I think he had 100 flights over the hump. I don't think, no, it was 50 probably. And, they counted a flight over the Himalayas from India to China as a mission, and they were hauling gasoline with a B-24 configured to a transport. And we had other guys that were had been over in Europe. In fact, one of the flight chiefs that I had, he was over in Corregidor, and his B-17 was the last one to leave Corregidor with MacArthur on it. They took him to some little island where some right there in the Philippines, where a submarine picked him up, and he said General MacArthur's wife was real put out because she couldn't bring her furniture. And
Imagine there's some interesting stories, those old
timers, yeah, they
can tell you about what they did.
Yeah, well, you found out where the shortfall was. I mean, there was mistakes made, and but it's like everything else, just like Ford, GM, and the rest of them. They made their mistakes. They went bankrupt. Now they're still going. But they
Go back, fix them, and start over again.
start over again. That's right.
So how long were you in Colorado?
14 months. That was the nicest place I ever, as far as climate's concerned, that was, you couldn't beat that, even in the summertime. It could be 90 degrees, you sit in the shade and there was a nice dry breeze. I mean, you didn't need any air conditioning there. Whereas if you were in Florida or Mississippi, then while I was in San Diego, that was in the fall and Thanksgiving time. That was nice there. I mean, that's California climate. But, and even the climate over in the Marianas wasn't that bad. I mean, you're sitting on an island, it's just a big rock out there in the ocean. And once the sun goes down, why, it cools off pretty decent. But during the day, it's pretty hot and muggy.
What did you do for entertainment while you were in the States?
Oh, you could go, you had your movies there, base movies. You could go, most of the time you went to town on the weekend, there was the USO dances, and you'd go to the roller skating rinks and you just hit the bars, do this, do that. And
When you took time off for a leave, where did you go? Home, or
I went home, oh yeah.
were you married when you went in?
No, we never got married till after I got out.
But you had a girlfriend then?
Yeah, my wife.
There we are. Carry over from high school?
No, we got together right after I got out of high school. I worked with her uncle, and I met her on a blind date.
I'll be darned. So what happens after Colorado?
Well, after Colorado, I went to the Wendover Field, Utah, joined the 509th Composite Group, and and that was a little bit on the primitive side out there. You were 100 and some miles from Salt Lake City, out there in the flatlands of Utah. The barracks were regular wood barracks, but they never put the siding on. They just put the tar paper on, and then they just ran some strips up. And and they were temporary barracks all the time that base was in progress, from what I understand. There was a lot of them, but then but then there again, I mean, they had a bus running back and forth. You get a 3-day pass and go to Salt Lake City when you had some time off.
I imagine that was exciting, huh?
Not too exciting in Salt Lake City. The only thing that was strange there was you soon found out that the state of Utah, even though it was dry, they gave every GI a liquor rationing card, and you could buy a bottle of liquor, whiskey or gin or whatever was your favorite, and any drugstore in Salt Lake City served 3-2 beer. And they didn't care what you did. I mean, the guys would just set the bottle down there, and they'd automatically bring you your beer and bring you another small glass, and you reached down and you poured your drink in there and set it down out of sight, so you didn't scandalize the people. And that's the way it went. And, but what you really went to Salt Lake City for was, you know, to see the Mormon temple and so on and so forth.
So you got a chance to get some sightseeing in?
Oh yeah, every place I went. I mean, even Colorado, I went to Denver, Colorado Springs. I mean, you know, saw what there was about. Not too much, but.
You know, we're in the middle of a war. Did you feel any pressure for what you were doing and potentially where you may get shipped? I mean, did that cross your mind at that time?
Not that much. I would imagine if you were overseas in an infantry regiment or maybe it would be pressure if you were a gun crew in the 8th Air Force. There'd be an awful lot of pressure, but I mean, my particular job, you just did the job and best you could. And if you didn't do it, you'd be told.
So it's just like a civilian job in a way?
Yeah, in other words, yeah.
Now the next step, did you have any feeling as to where you would be shipped? The South Pacific or over in the...
Well, when I went to Wendover Field, Utah, we knew we were going to the South Pacific because the war was already, while I was there, the war in Europe ended. And we knew we were going to the South Pacific. And we knew we were going to drop a large bomb, but we didn't know it was an atomic bomb. And we were we weren't too sure, you know, why there was all that top secret classification. I mean, but after it was all over, we knew why.
When you got this kind of information, when was that? Do you remember?
Well, you just picked up pieces, you know, talking to this guy and that guy.
Must have been in 45 then.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was.
Was there anything going on on your base? Particular training with the B-29 or?
I never knew just what. It's all I knew was they flew to Cuba. The flight crews were always going from Wendover Field to Batista Field, Cuba, and back. Or most of the time that was, and they were making bomb runs on probably little islands out there off of Cuba. And but I never knew too much about what they did as far as their. But the only thing I knew later on was, you know, that I mean, when they dropped the atomic bomb, I mean, the first thing they did was they had to peel off and get as far up in the air as they could, because when that thing exploded, they felt the shockwave up there. And
so when did you get shipped over to the Pacific theater?
That was in the, we were over there about 3 months, so August, would be September, I'm going back. Probably about June.
Did
June
you,
of 45.
45?
Mhm.
Okay, so
And they didn't fly, most of the group, as far as the ground crew personnel, we went over on a victory ship. We went from Hawaii, or went from Seattle to Hawaii, from Hawaii to Tinian.
that must have been a lot of fun on one of those troop ships.
It was a little bit on the scary side. They would creak and groan at night, and we had in the front half of the ship we had a black engineer battalion. They were going over to Hawaii, and that creaking and groaning at night just scared them half to death. Them poor guys were sick. They'd never seen a boat before in their life. There was a lot of sick guys on that victory ship. It was the USS Cape Victory, and in fact, we had one cook that got so sick, seasick, that all they could feed him was oranges and orange juice. And we were aboard that victory ship a total of 21 days making that.
Oh.
And that poor guy was in sick bay. Well, when it come time to come home, they didn't put him on the ship. They flew him back home.
Did you get seasick?
Just a little bit when I first went on. And one guy that had been overseas, we were talking about it, and he went over the Atlantic, and he said, well, those guys, he said, what they told you was when you got aboard, go up on top. And when they start out, get used to the boat ride up on top, then go down below. He said, if you go down below right away and you hear all that croaking and groaning, and everybody's getting sick around you, you're gonna get sick too. He said, you get your stomach, and I never had a problem. The only problem I had was when I was coming back, I was on a attack transport, Navy attack transport, and I had an asthma attack. But I was fortunate they had a good sick bay, and they had those corpsmen that they knew their business. He had me pretty well cleaned up, or had my asthma attack cured in about 2-3 days. He knew just what to do.
So when you get shipped over to Tinian, was there any scuttlebutt that maybe there was a purpose behind you going there?
We just knew we were going to drop a big bomb on Japan.
So you knew that already, huh?
Oh yeah, they called it the gimmick.
They called it a what?
They called it the gimmick.
The gimmick?
Yeah, it was a great big, they had a big, it was a conventional bomb, only built the size and shape of the atomic bomb. And the B-29s that were used there, they were specially modified to handle that big bomb. And we knew what was going, what they were going to do, but and it was, they said, well, it'll be really make a big bang. Well, we had no idea. Didn't know it'd be radioactive and all the rest of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But
so were you involved with the Enola Gay or any of those that were involved?
There was the Enola Gay and the Boxcar, and I was a ground crew on Top Secret. And Top Secret was number 3. Top Secret sat on Saipan on each run in case they had any problems, they would, getting over there close, they would land at Saipan and transfer the bomb to Top Secret, and they never had it.
So what was the second one that you said the first one was Lanola Gay, but what
The
was the second?
second one was dropped by,
Boxcar.
yeah,
No,
boxcar.
that was the name of the bomb, wasn't it?
No.
Oh, that was the
that
plane?
Yeah, the captain's name was Box.
Yeah.
That's where it came from.
Yeah,
So what was the bomb's name on the first trip?
One was,
we just called it,
Fat Boy or
there was Fat Boy and Big Boy.
Fat Boy and Big Boy?
Yeah. And some of that stuff that you know, as years went by, I got a whole library home full of that stuff, but can't read too good anymore.
So the bomb, the two bombs are dropped. What's going on now on
Right,
Tinian?
Colonel Tibbets called us all in and says, "Boys, we made our mission." And he didn't tell us that the country had run out of, that was all the bombs we had. And he said, "It looks like this thing's gonna be over pretty soon." And they were already making plans to fly back to the States, and it wasn't too long, you know, before the war was over. But in the meantime, or right after the war was over, or no, it was just before the war was over, I got a letter from my mother, and she said that Bill Smith, one of the guys I went to high school with, said my brother was, Bill Smith, they were both, my brother and him were both in the Marine Corps. She says, "I think he's on Saipan." So I went to the Red Cross director, because we had been talking, and he just mentioned that he had been in the Marine Corps during World War I. And I went and told him about it, and he said, "Well, I got a lot of friends over there." He says, "I'll make a couple phone calls and I'll see if he's over there." So next 2-3 days later, I walk into my Quonset hut, there's my brother sitting on my bed. The guy gave him a 3-day pass. And so we fooled around there. I mean, we had some pretty good quarters there. I mean, that was like going to a spa for him compared to his. He hadn't seen ice cream in about 6 months. I mean, we went in, our quarters were all Quonset huts on Tinian, and the Sealy Battalion that did all the construction work there on Tinian had left, and we got all their equipment. They had big refrigerators, they had everything you wanted. And you had a decent shower. I mean, everything was all outdoors, but gravity fed. But they devised, they had ways of catching the rainwater and putting it up. Well, you know, what they did was they used the same principle that the railroad did to water their locomotives. They put a big
Water tank?
water tank up there and then just piped it all around. So, I mean, you had, everything was outside, and you could turn the spigot on, do your washing, and
What was it like on Tinian? Was it just a big rock sitting out there in the middle of the
it was
Pacific?
big coral rock. I mean, and then the Seabees made all the roads, they were expressways. They were, I mean, when you left your base and went to the field out there, Why, they put you on a truck and buzz you out there, and then they had trucks going back and forth. And just like running, just like a bus schedule. And
Were there civilian people on the island?
no, there was no civilian. There were just some native, well, I don't know what they call them. Somebody said they were off-caste Japanese people, but the Japanese didn't like them. And we went by their quarters. I mean, they lived in boxes and, just an old shanty town. And then little kids were standing out there with, all they had on was just a shirt. Well, there was no diapers, so. And they looked pretty forlorn and tough.
So other than being stuck on the base, that was about the limit.
The only time I got off base was after I found out where my brother was, and I got a three-day pass to go over to see him. And then when the war ended, I got a three-day pass to go over to Saipan. And my brother and Bill Smith and Buckshot McCormick, he was from Grand Rapids. They were all in the 2nd Marine Division. And I got over there and they said, you got any money? I said, yeah, I got a $20 bill. And Buckshot says, well, I know a guy down in the Navy. I'll get some beer. Maybe I can buy you a souvenir. I said, well, see if you can get me a nip flag, will you? And so he paid $10 for the jug of whiskey, and they paid $10 for a 31 caliber Japanese rifle. So then I brought that home. My grandson's got it today. Yeah. The Japanese soldier that owned it, he carved his name on there. And and looked like Sizan, probably was Japanese or not Japanese, but anyway. Yeah.
So how long did you have to stay on Tinian after
Not
that?
too long. We were off there in nothing flat. In fact, I only had 40 points, and I was on and the whole group was, the ground crew of the 509th Composite Group was off of there and on their way to Roswell, New Mexico. And we figured that we were going to end up in Germany. I mean, we didn't realize it, but there was talk that they were going to send the 509th Composite Group to Germany. They never did. But they
Well,
stayed.
the war would have been over in Germany by
The
then.
war was over in Germany, but they were already having trouble.
Really?
I mean, because they must have been having trouble because they were talking about us going to Germany, so they were having trouble with Russia already. And so then we got to Roswell, New Mexico, and the problem there was all the parts and this and that and the other thing had been shipped over to the South Pacific, and there wasn't that much left in the States, and they had to scrounge around trying to get parts, and half the time we couldn't even get enough parts to keep the planes up in the air. They were running out of spark plugs all the time. Not spark plugs, but
What planes were you working on in Roswell?
the B-29.
Yeah?
That's all, that's those 15 B-29s and the whole group, I mean, they stayed together till after Curtis LeMay took over.
Now, was that the same base that was involved in
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
That had already happened though, hadn't it?
No, it was later, after that.
I thought it was 44, but maybe not.
Maybe if it was, I never heard anything about it, but.
No?
Some people are, follow that UFO deal, but
I think that was later,
Was it?
yeah.
Well, I know it was in the 40s, but
Yeah.
maybe.
I'm pretty sure,
Six, maybe.
it was pretty cut and dried. And then after we got there, well, we were already, and they called us in and they says, well, if you, any of you guys wanna stay, we'll give you, another stripe, if you were enlist. And put everybody be on flight pay. And they made it sound real good. And then I was thinking about it, we ain't got no parts, I'm just sitting around. I really wanna go home. So, I know I'm gonna take my discharge. So they got my discharge and they gave me travel orders to Ohio, to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And I was discharged from there. But in the meantime, what I did was, they gave me the money for the ticket, put the money in my pocket, and I hitchhiked from Roswell, New Mexico to Wright-Patterson Air Base.
You hitchhiked, huh?
Hitchhiked. If you were in service, you just stand by the side of the road.
Cars screeching to stop to help you out,
Yeah,
eh?
yeah. Throw your old, they knew the guys were getting, in fact, I rode most of the way with a salesman from Tennessee. He had an old Nash. And I forget what I knew he was a salesman, but, usually you'd stop in I think it probably took me about 3 days, that was all. And, I mean, even, no matter when, I mean, if you were in service back then, you went alongside the road, you got a ride.
So did your folks know you were coming home?
Yeah, they knew on my way, but didn't know when.
So you get home, now what happens?
Well, you get home, you find out there ain't much, nobody could find a job, so everybody filed for unemployment.
All that engine repair work, you didn't have any?
Well, the sad thing about it was, there was umpteen guys with the same qualification.
Yeah.
And, so, the government at that time, they gave you, 20, or I think it was $22 a week unemployment. So, that wasn't a whole lot. And then, I got my wife's friend, he worked for an auto parts store. He got me a job there. I went in the auto parts business. And went to work for George Electric. I mean, they were auto electric business. And worked on the counter there, and then there was some of that stuff you couldn't, I got some electronics training, under the GI Bill and so on and so forth.
So you didn't use the GI Bill to go to school?
I didn't go, I did just part-time,
Yeah.
just night school. And then I worked there for a while, and I went to work in the heating, ventilating, cooling business for R.O. Detman for about 9 years. Then I went to work for a outfit in Ann Arbor that was working on government contracts for NASA. Did maintenance work for those guys. And then I went to work for in Rochester. that outfit, they made brooches and tracer lays. And building electrical panels, doing electrical work on machines. Stayed there till '82, and then I went to work doing maintenance, electrician work for the tank plant here, more. And then I retired from GD, and I think it was around 1990.
In the meantime, you must have raised a family?
I raised 7 kids.
7?
Yeah.
Are they all here in the area?
No, they're all, one's in Colorado, one's 2 in Pennsylvania, one's in California, and then 3 of them are here in Michigan.
How many times a granddaddy?
Just 4 times.
4?
2 boys and 2 girls. No, 4, 2, 4, 6. You got 6 boys and 2 granddaughters.
So what else can you tell us about your experience?
5.
Oh, well.
Did you stay in touch with any of your friends?
Oh, yeah. There was Byron Prescott. He married a girl from Pueblo, Colorado. And we always corresponded together. Then Leonard Dunthing, he went from Pueblo to Wendover with me. He was in the 509th. And he stayed in touch. My brother, or when my son got married, why, he lived in New Haven, Connecticut. Son got married in New York. He come down for the wedding, and my son's wedding. He came to Saginaw a couple of times, or not Saginaw, but to Sterling Heights a couple of times, driving through. Then when we got married, Buckshot McCormick, he was in the 2nd Marine Division. He was a buddy of my brother's. He come to our wedding. Brought the wedding gift. Libby glassware. Yeah, I think we got a couple glasses left.
Got a pretty good memory.
Well, they were all good memories.
Yeah, sounds like it.
There was some tough ones. I mean, I lost some buddies, high school buddies. I mean, Rip Schlager, he was in the Lady Be Good B-24 that crashed in the desert. They found those guys all scattered around years ago. And Wilford France, he was on the Arizona. And when I got it to Pearl Harbor, and when we went to Hawaii, I found my Frenchy Castanier's grave. It's in the Punch Bowl cemetery there in Hawaii. And but
Did he die at Pearl too?
no, Frenchy Castanier, he died of Saipan. They got him on. Yeah, he died on the initial landing, from what I understood.
You said your brother passed away,
Yeah, he died of a heart attack years ago.
so he wasn't one of the losses in the war?
No, he never. When the 2nd Marine Division went after Okinawa, he was lucky enough to be they attacked an island off, sort of a diversionary attack, and it wasn't too well fortified. He said, we just run over the thing, and then the next thing you know, he said that they had me on the beach, and he said I was running the radio all the time, relaying messages. So he lucked out. The big problem, from what I understand with the guys in the Marine Corps, was that initial hit in the beach, I mean, getting set up. And from what they told me and what I read and heard was that they had, you know, the Japanese had some awful machine gun fire for those guys to run up against. But other than that, why? No, it was something that I never expected to see. I mean, never expected this, you know, I mean, it was an education in itself, just traveling, the average guy did. And, you know, you met all kinds of people. What surprised me, I never figured seemed to be more guys from Pennsylvania and New York in the Army than anybody else. Every time you turned around, some guy was from Pennsylvania or from New York. I don't know why. But I guess there was a lot. But,
Well, thank you very much for sharing your experience with us. Appreciate it very much.
well, nice to pass it on.